Welcome back to another episode of Unscripted, the go-to podcast for those flipping the script and taking the unexpected path. I'm your host, Jessica Bergio, holistic life and business coach, author, speaker, and self-proclaimed high-energy hype girl. Each week, I'm bringing you inside. No gatekeeping here. I'll touch on proven holistic business strategies, powerful mindset shifts that have led my clients through massive transformations, and no BS conversation with industry leaders designed to help you get out of your own way to actively pursue a life of purpose. If you're ready to ditch the limitations at the door, hit follow and get ready to be activated to step boldly towards your big goals. Now let's dive in. Guys, how much are we loving these amazing guests that have been coming on Tuesdays? I think Unscripted has just gone to a new level with the level of guests we've been getting on the show. So many thought leaders, so many people doing big things in the coaching industry, entrepreneurs. And Tracy is no different. She's our guest today. Tracy Matthews is a jewelry designer, entrepreneur, and the host of the top-rated Thrive by Design podcast, and the author of The Desired Brand Effect, Stand Out in a Saturated Market. She is the founder of not one, but 4 companies, including her current one, Flourish and Thrive. Her passion is helping business owners execute their big vision and spend more time in their creative zone of genius. Her jewelry has been featured in more than 350 stores around the world, as well as top media outlets like Entrepreneur, In Style, The Today Show, and Elle Magazine. We talked about creativity as far as reinvention in your business and your life, around what it looks like to really market some of that and take ownership of big pivots in your life. She shares with us how she came to move from New York to Arizona. And there were so many juicy little nuggets in here. And it's really fun when you get to connect with people who've become your friends on social media and have a deeper conversation around their journey in entrepreneurship. She got a little emotional a couple times, which I just actually loved because it showed how much she genuinely still cares about what she does for her clients. She's also a retreat host, mastermind host. So we had a lot to jam out on. I know you're going to love this episode. You're going to get so many takeaways around really just being able to own your journey and appreciate each and every step that comes along with it. So I hope you love this episode as much as I did, and I'll see you inside. I'm excited for another epic guest on today's show because we have been following each other for a little bit on social media. We're like friends of friends. And that's one of the things we were just jamming about, that I love the power of social media for that, is we can meet people that we would never otherwise have an opportunity to meet. Tracy's literally one of those people who's walking alongside the journey, coaching and teaching to past versions of her, helping them to streamline the process to take their business 10x in a variety of different ways. You have a creative background, and I can't wait to dig in and share with you all of the juicy nuggets that you've learned along the way with marketing and all the things. But girl, welcome to the show. I'm excited to finally connect with you.
I'm so excited to be here, and everything just froze and stopped for a minute. So I probably in the recording can have this weird face for a minute.
Whenever I use Riverside, that's what happens. It uploads in real time. And people who ask me about podcasting and the things that I love about it, it's connecting. The things I hate about it is tech. And this platform is one of those that sometimes wants to glitch on you. So if it does at any time, let me know and we can redo it. But it always comes out clear on both ends, no matter what.
That's what I've heard. I think I'm going to switch to this platform anyway, because I've been recording on Zoom since 2015. So I'm excited to try something new.
It is fun. Definitely everything has its perks. So I think overall, Riverside's been a great platform. It's great for editing. It's great for visuals. Everything comes out pretty clear, but just the recording process is a pain in the ass. So from one podcaster to another, you feel me.
I totally feel you. I just like that it comes out with super clear video, though, at the end of it.
Super clear. But we, in the meantime, look like we're part of the Wi-Fi, sci-fi shit. You're like, wait, I caught half of what you said. But your journey has been amazing. You have such a cool background. And I think we relate on so many levels to pivoting and going from one market to another. And you're just in a season of being able to help other people do that. You have a book out, you have a podcast. We have so much we can dive into. But what are some of your favorite things that you love to coach and teach on?
I have a couple of different businesses. The one that most people know me for is called Flourish and Thrive Academy. I mentor jewelry business owners and other product business owners and help them run and build successful, thriving businesses. And we've been doing that I say we because I have a team that I work with for the last, I think it's been 13 years. I don't know where the time has come. But I've been an entrepreneur for 30 years. And I started out in the industry as a jewelry designer, selling to retail stores around the world. And so there's a whole story behind that. But after a natural progression, that first business kind of wound down. I started a new jewelry company that with all the lessons that I learned from the first company, and then quickly had a really profitable company. And so I wanted to teach other people in the jewelry industry. This is the beginning of online coaching instead of meeting your coach one-on-one, because this is back in 2012. I wanted to be able to support people in the jewelry industry because it was something I never had when I was first starting out. I'm always reinventing myself because I'm a 7 on the Enneagram and someone who gets bored really easily. I'm like, what else can I do to have 5 businesses at the same time? And so a couple of years ago, I launched a platform, and I call it a platform because there aren't really courses or anything that are involved with it right now, but I do host creativity and wellness retreats, and I support women in their creative reinvention. So if they're at a milestone or they're at a place where they're feeling like they need to pivot or move in a different direction, or they just want to cast a bigger vision for what they're creating and moving forward into, I support them through that process and help them think a little bit bigger and have fun in the process.
That's so rad. Okay, thank you for speaking to those of us that are multi-passionate and those of us who also get bored easily too. I think that's like a shame-driven thing. My mom shamed me into feeling like I was only wanting to leave the beauty industry because I was quote unquote bored. And I was actually quite offended. I'm like, I don't think I've ever been bored doing hair in my life. I think the thing that's boring is that I'm looking at myself and my potential thinking, is this all you're going to do with your life? And that's where I guess the boring word could come in. But I also want to feel like I'm always growing and pushing myself. And so I didn't feel like that was happening in my world before. And like you, I knew I could help more people if I could just figure out a way to expand my reach, because it's one thing to do things in person. It's a whole nother thing to take it online. And you got in before the online coaching world was somewhat saturated, which it feels like it is, but there's clearly always enough clients to go around. Let's talk about the fact that you have a book out and you are really someone who can help other people get out of their own way and figure out this process in order to reinvent themselves. So can we dig into that a little bit?
Yeah. So my book is not about reinvention. It's actually about branding a business, but it's actually applicable for any type of business. It's called The Desire Brand Effect: Stand Out in a Saturated Market with a Timeless Brand. And it's the methodology that I've been using to support jewelry business owners for, I guess, the last 12, 13 years or so. But I turned it into basically a genius model and a framework. And now I teach through that model. But the awesome part about it is that I've given it to friends who are coaches. I've given it to friends who have other product businesses. Thousands of copies have been sold to jewelry business owners. And they all say the same thing, that it's literally a framework to grow a business. And I'll just give a high-level overview of what the book's about. And if you're interested in it, you can go grab it on Amazon. But basically, there's 3 pillars to the Desire Brand Effect. It's about creating desire for your brand, sharing desire, or selling. I feel like we are in the sharing economy these days because sales is really about helping someone solve a problem and coming from a place of service. And then being able to scale that desire. So through this framework, I support people in attracting their ideal customers and the right audience through their brand assets, their pricing, their messaging, all that stuff. And then finding the best way for them to convert those people into paying customers, and then turn that into a system where they get the people coming back to them, buying over and over again. Because we know that it is 80% more expensive to find new customers than it is to sell to your existing customers or to keep a customer for a long time. So that's the high level of the framework. If you want to go pick it up, it's awesome. I think what you might be referring to is when we were talking about retreats. And I have this whole process for creative reinvention that I started taking people through. Can I share a little backstory about like why this came about?
Yes, please. Definitely. I love anybody with a process or a framework. And I think I misspoke when I asked you the part of the question with that question, but I know that's how your brain works. And I'm always obsessed with people who can actually put things into very clear frameworks. And that's really the strategy piece. Give us the step-by-step, because that's what most people need. What's that next right step? So yes, take us back a little bit.
I started my first company in the 90s. I'm in my 50s. And I was just really excited about being a famous jewelry designer. That was my goal. I wanted to be in all the stores. I wanted to build this amazing business. I was in over 350 stores around the world. I had all the press, all the things that you wanted, like In Style magazine, on the Today Show, several features in Lucky magazine. I don't know if you remember that magazine, but back in the day, people would literally buy from that magazine. I kind of miss it because it was a great tool for selling. Anyway, got all the things and had all these celebrity clients and all the things that I said I wanted, but I just was really unsatisfied. And I started getting really bored. And through that process, I just kept building, thinking that if I just kept growing the company, I would be happy. And so I got myself into a situation where I landed a spot on QVC, and 2007, I think, was when we landed it. So I was on QVC twice, in 2007 and 2008. I kept doing all these trade shows, and under the guise, because I'd been doing this maybe for 10 years at the time, that doing more was actually going to get me more sales. And so what it was doing was actually digging me a little bit in a financial hole. I did land some really big accounts. I was getting orders placed for $100,000 at a time, but I didn't see what was coming. I was dating this guy at the time, and he's like, oh, the worst is coming. All this stuff's happening. And I'm just like, you're just a pessimist. I'm an optimist over here. Everything's great. And unfortunately, we all know what happened in September of 2008. The market crashed. The economy went into a shit show. And basically, I went from the previous year shipping on average in the holiday season, $150,000 months to selling $10,000 a month. And when you have an inventory business, if you don't have the sales to support your cash flow nut, you're basically screwed. And so I had bankruptcy notices coming in from stores saying that they weren't paying, but they were keeping the inventory. And there was nothing I could do. I was in a really bad position. Plus, I was completely burnt out. And I was literally just beyond bored with this business, and I didn't know what to do. But because at that time, it was so closely tied to my identity, I didn't really know how to unwind myself from it. So it took me a while to get to a place where I was like, okay, just because I decided to have this business doesn't mean it's the only business I will ever have. And also, it doesn't necessarily make me a failure, even though the business is failing and I decided to shut it down. And it's also okay to change your mind. And that was the big revelation that I came to. And that came through working with a coach at the time. He's really a consultant. He was this old man, Phil, God rest your soul. But he would teach through the lens of parables and stories. And so it really landed with me because I was like a visual person. I could understand the message that was coming through instead of him just dictating like what I needed to do. He would share it through these biblical stories because he was a very religious man. And it allowed me just this opportunity to think, oh, I can actually recreate myself and reinvent myself and do that in alignment with the way that actually lights me up. And so what he helped me do was got really clear on what I love doing instead of all the parts that I didn't love doing. And how do we build a business around that? And so that's when my second jewelry business was launched. And because I was so in alignment and I loved what I was doing and I was actually doing the parts of the business that I loved, I did not love not having the team to do the admin part. But once the business started growing, I hired a bookkeeper and had someone doing the tech stuff that I'm not very good at. But I realized like, oh, you only need someone part-time. You don't need them all the time to do this stuff. That business became really successful really quickly. Like within 18 months, I think I had my most profitable month where I was taking home $30,000. And that was a lot of money for me at the time. And I'm like, oh, there's this other way. And right around that time was when I found Marie Forleo, who you might know. I was in her first round of B school way back in the day. So that's when I decided to launch Flourish and Thrive Academy, which was my next reinvention. And then I've had so many since then. So this process has really been going on for a long time. I really got clear on, okay, so if I need to let go of the old version of me, what does that new version look like? And how do I call that in? And how do I also be okay and forgive myself for the mistakes that I made in the process? I'm such an emotional person that this stuff, it's so ingrained in my being and my fiber that it has so much purpose and meaning to me that it's hard not to get emotional about it. Even when I see people who come to me for support going through the process, I just get so excited for them.
It's hard to teach from a place of not knowing exactly what it feels like to be in those positions. And I think sometimes we're gifted these lessons, if you will, in order to have the empathy and the depth to hold space for people when they're working through things that we would never have understood if you hadn't walked that path already. And as much as people want to see the after result of all the hard work, often comes with things feeling like failures that were a bit of redirection and a lesson that there's no way someone could have taught you that lesson. You had to learn it and walk through it in your own season. But it's always funny how redirection puts you on the next right path. And then you're able to take something like meeting that guy, Phil, and being able to be coached by him to be like, hey, let's find all the fun pieces that you love doing. You may have to still do some shit you don't want to do, but how can we take all the pieces that you do love and create a business out of it? No one shared that kind of forethought with us in high school and college. It's like, this is how you could make a career. I see all these new terms on social media, people's like titles, and I'm like, they made that up and I love that for them. That didn't even exist 5, 10, 15 years ago. And that's the coolest thing about being self-taught or putting yourself out there and doing self-education by taking people's courses or learning different programs or just learning from different people's experiences, which is exactly what you do now. You have your own podcast, you have a book, you teach women these different ways to work through stuff. And I think the piece I connected with you on is the creativity. I feel like sometimes in my business, being home and not being in the busy, bustling, awesome vibe of a salon, I lose pieces of me that were once just creatively brought out from the energy of the space I was in. And you talk about founders and just business owners needing to have that in their life in order to stay in flow. Can we kind of dive into that? Because it's funny, I've met a lot of entrepreneurs who feel like they're actually not creative. And I'm like, oh, no, you have to have a creative vision in order to start a business. Even if it's a quote unquote boring business, there had to be some level of creativity for you to come up with that.
I love it. I love it when people say they're not creative because I'm like, yes, you are. When I had my first company, I had moved it from San Francisco to New York. And when I first moved there, one of my really close friends, I was actually teaching yoga at the time, and she was one of my yoga students. She happened to move there. She starts dating this guy. He's in finance, and there's this whole world of finance that's opened up to me, meeting all these people. Long story short, he's like, why don't I come and help you create some financial modeling? I didn't know what financial modeling was. I'm like, sure, let's do that. That sounds like a good idea. So he comes to my office and he's looking around. There's jewelry everywhere. My little workers in the back putting this stuff together. And he's like, wow, this is so creative. I don't have a creative bone in my body. And so he comes in, he asks me a few questions. He comes back like a week later. He opens up his computer. He's plugging in some numbers. All this stuff is like spitting out. I'm like, how the heck did you create that? That's so creative. And the best part about this story is his name is Art. And I think that's ironic that he's saying he's not creative, but he has a skill set that requires creativity. And even though it's maybe to most people might seem like a little bit more analytical because you're putting numbers in a spreadsheet, you have to be somewhat creative to understand how do you create those formulas and make it all work together. I don't know. That's my thought on creativity.
I think that's been like a key piece that's unlocked for a lot of people. I have a girl in my mastermind right now that came from the corporate. She was an attorney for many, many years, and she spoke to the fact of being not creative. And now she's one of the most creative people I know. Like the things she creates on social media, even for her graphics, and just her writing is very creative. The way she is able to express herself at such a high level. I'm like, you're literally a creative poet almost. The things that come out of her mouth, I'm like, it's so beautiful. And she's like, really? I'm like, yeah, you just don't see your gifts because you've been so immersed in that world. It's normal to maybe speak like that. I'm like, that's not normal. People don't normally talk like that, or they can't articulate themselves. That's one of your superpowers. And so she's really honed in on that. And then she started a podcast where she's able to verbally communicate now. And it's so beautiful to watch people come out of their shell and to step into something that they didn't even think that they had.
I'm always so impressed with people who are just naturally really well-spoken. But sometimes I interview people and I'm like, how did you learn to speak so eloquently? And they're like, oh, I totally messed it up. I'm like, you sound amazing. How do you do that?
Everyone's so hard on themselves. And that's one of the things that I've learned to give myself a lot more grace for was with this podcast is I didn't and wouldn't listen to my episodes back in the early years. And now I make myself listen to the episode because a lot of times I'll batch things out a week or a few weeks ahead of time. Even as the interviewer, I'm not always fully present because I'm in go mode. So I like to listen back to the episodes, pick up some nuggets that the guest said, or should I have said something differently? Should I have asked better questions? I like to study my own tape. And I've learned over the years to pay attention to things like and like, and to get better and to be more creative with my flow. It's like one of those things where now I'm like, oh, good job, Jess. You did a great job versus picking myself apart, which is so much easier to do than giving yourself credit for something. Gosh, especially as women, we're so hard on ourselves.
I know. And being a podcaster is no joke because I have a podcast too, as you mentioned. I'm recording an episode right after this, a solo episode. I think we have 475 episodes recorded. It is no joke to go in week after week, to be consistent, to release an episode and keep going. It's not easy. And it's remarkable that people can be so consistent with content.
I always say when people are asking like, hey, should I start a podcast? I'm like, what do you think is the thing you're going to be able to be most consistent with? Do you do better with posting reels? Is that more fun for you? Because reels can drive traffic to your page from the explore page, and then you can nurture them on social media, maybe move them over to an email list. Podcasting is easier for me than figuring out what trending audio there is. Mind you, my podcast episode is probably not going to go viral like a potential reel could, but I just know my bandwidth and I know where I think my age group lives, maybe wanting more depth and wanting to go with me in the long form sense. And they usually say you want to create content the way you like to ingest content. So if you're a TikTok junkie and that's all you want is 10 seconds of crack, go create that. That's what you should live in. But if you are someone who really enjoys podcasting and reading books, then maybe you're going to be a writer and have a podcast. So I like that there's a little something for everybody right now, even us older women who didn't have this shit when we started our businesses 25 years ago. I feel like sometimes we're so anxious and I'm like, Can you still teach an old dog new tricks? I'm like, you can.
Actually, I need new tricks all the time. Do you want to get back to the creativity question? I didn't really answer that. It's my belief that creativity is our natural state. And if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it is the highest form of self-expression, which I think is so cool. And as a business owner, it's really important for us to be creative. Now, depending on how you operate your business and what you're like, I've always admired people who have been able to remove themselves from their business. But if you haven't, and I still haven't, after 30 years of being an entrepreneur, been able to completely remove myself from some parts of the day-to-day of my business. I do have a team and people who support me in this business. What I really need to do is to protect my time and have what I call creative days. And that's just one day that's open where I can explore strategy or ideas or do something that is going to actually directly or indirectly help me grow my business, but there's not necessarily a tangible outcome to it. And there's no meetings on those days unless I decide that I want to just record a bunch of content. And those days are designed to really just get into that flow state. And so I think all entrepreneurs, it doesn't matter who they are creative. The type of creativity is just different because creativity isn't necessarily the translation of being an artist. Sure, that's one form of creativity, but solving complex problems is one of the most creative gifts that most of us have as business owners. So there's a lot of different ways to look at it, but protecting that creativity is the most important thing that you can possibly do.
I love what you just said about problem solving is partly creativity. I literally just recorded an episode around that. Problem solving needs to be one of your first loves if you are an entrepreneur, because you have to be so open to problem solving versus just finding a problem with everything. There's going to be problems. And I think right now it showcases how creative people can get with their solutions to said problems, because the world is whatever you want it to be. So whereas there was once only one solution to a given problem, now there's like 100 solutions to that problem. And that can feel overwhelming as an entrepreneur. So being ってbe decisive on how could I best solve this problem in my own creative way? Like Art would have done it differently than maybe we would have done. You literally made jewelry. I did hair. Our processes would be much different than his, but we need both. And that's why it's great to be able to work with people who have different strengths than you have. So talk to me about how some of these retreats work. I think that's the season I'm in, is just getting back into some in-person action and in the energy of seeing people. How did you start doing these?
I've been called to do this for a long time. It's so funny because one of my original mentors, Ryan Levesque, he has a company called The Ask Method. I don't even know if it's still called that, but he was really big on quizzing people and creating types and stuff like that. So one time I took his quiz and he's like, you're meant to be hosting retreats. That's how you should build your business around. And I thought that was pretty funny because I was really called to be leading retreats. And so with Flourish and Thrive Academy, we've been hosting masterminds and retreats and events since we started this community. I think maybe as early as like the second year in. So I'd seen what it was like to get people together. And a couple years ago, I hosted my first Creative Force of Nature retreat. And the idea for this retreat was to combine a mastermind experience, a luxury vacation, and creativity in the retreat so that you can take time away from your business to dream up your next idea, to maybe reinvent your vision of where you're going in your business, maybe to release the things that aren't working for you. I just had one. We just finished it. I think when we started talking, I was about to host that retreat. And oh my God, it was so amazing. The funny part is I created this like amazing process for everyone to go through because everyone was so in the moment. We didn't even get through the entire process, but it just goes to show you that we were so divinely guided with what exactly the crew needed that it was amazing. And so the way I host these is that the first day we call in what it is that we're creating. We take a look, what is the next reinvention or what is it that you want to call into your life or your business? And then one of my favorite parts about it is incorporating art somehow into it. For this particular retreat, we created a cipher. Do you know what a cipher is?
I've heard of them. No, I don't.
The way that we did this one is that we all downloaded a code. So whatever the code or the word or the meaning of this new reinvention that we wanted to create, then we type it into this technology little app and it comes up with a code. And then you hide that code inside your painting and paint something that's meaningful to you that you put on a wall. So no one really knows what the code is except for you, unless they can find it inside your painting. It's really fun.
Through what you call in, you come up with a word or definition, or how do you put something into the app?
You've heard this. What's your word of the year? What is it that you're calling in? What's the thing? Before the retreat, I had them do a little bit of an exercise. I'm like, I want you to think, what is the thing that you are trying to call in for your life? Can you dial that down into a word or a short phrase? And so I took them through a process. I'm not going to walk you through all of that because it would just take too long, but took them through a process to identify what that was. And so each person came up with something that was meaningful to them. So for everyone, it was different. Some people shared. But the cool part is that 2 women came up with the same word, which was connected expansion. That's what they were calling in. We were going around the table just sharing what it was. And then one person says, my phrase is connected expansion. And the person next to her looked at her like this. And she was like, are you fucking kidding me? That is my phrase. It was like so weird. There was this like interconnectivity with the group. So the calling in process, part of it is like a visioning process. I call it calling in because it's like at a high level, what is it that you're trying to create? What does it feel like? How do we bring our senses into it? What does it smell like? If you were already in that experience, who are you being in that experience? So I get them into this embodied state where they're actually being that person or feeling what it would be like to be that person. You might have heard of something like this in a manifestation exercise, but you're sitting with it and you're writing it and you're journaling and you're really embodying what that experience would be. And then dialing that down into whatever it is that you're calling in. And then we turn that into that word that turns into a cipher.
I love that. I'm going to have to do a process like that myself. So if someone is in the process of wanting to make a creative pivot or have a reinvention in their life, what are some takeaways or lessons you've learned from yours and then watching other people who might have gone through the process under your guidance? Because that seems to be an attractive piece of my business and the pivot that I've made. People come to me often like, how did you do it? I've been coined the pivot queen. I'm like, have I really pivoted that many? I was a hairdresser for 20 years. There wasn't a lot of pivots there, but I get it because so many people won't make that jump or won't even allow themselves to think bigger or to drop into a state of what do you want to call in with that intention? They wouldn't even be able to answer that question that you just asked.
Yeah, for me, this is something that I do. It's interesting because there was a point in time when I was really trying to call in a partner, and I would sit every single day and write in my journal and write about what it would be like to be with this person. And then all of a sudden, Jason appeared one day in my apartment in New York. Long story short, that's another story. But it does work. And the reason why it works is because when you're in that embodied state, you are actually experiencing the feelings of what it would like to be in whatever that invention is. I think the way that you get there to figure out what you want to call in is you just get really clear. What is it that I love to do? And depending on what it is that you're calling in, because calling in a relationship is a little bit different than calling in a new business direction. It's what do I love to do? How do I want to feel in that experience? What do I want to be doing every single day? What would be the thing that actually made me realize or showed me that I was being successful in that? And as you're going through this process of calling these things in, there's a whole system for it. I think the most important part of that is to get really clear on what is not working for you anymore. Because a lot of times these feelings of fear and shame can hold us back. And I know this to be true in my first business. And I know this to be true in the process that I'm going through right now of my own personal reinvention, which I'm not totally ready to talk about right now. But there is a lot of shame in it. Like if it was supposed to turn out this way and it doesn't, what does that say about me? So if you can get clear and just put a label on it, it helps you release and let it go. And I think one of my favorite questions is to ask yourself, what am I fucking done with? What will I no longer accept anymore? And what do I need to move on from? Because when you get to that point of being done, that's when the change can happen.
We just did a breath work today inside my mastermind group around calling in and letting go. And I should have said, what are you fucking done with? Because that's appropriate for my language. I just was on a podcast earlier being interviewed and she said, the only word we don't say is fuck. And I'm like, okay, I'll be very mindful. She's like, but you can say shit. But it's so funny. That's why the name of this show is called Unscripted now, because for the longest time I was running under the name of Beauty Inspires Beauty and it started to have me playing small. And that was one of the things was when I felt a lot of resistance around continuing the show, I'm like, what parts of this do I love and what parts do I fucking not like? And I'm like, I don't want to be silenced. I don't want to have a filter. I want this to be fun. Okay, fun means I get to say whatever I want. It's my show and I get to use whatever language I want. That's where we're starting. And so I think that freedom to give yourself room to play in that is so big. And a lot of people won't even give themselves that wiggle room to play because I think a lot of us as women who listen to this podcast are making decisions based on what needs to get done with the family, with life, with finances versus what they want to actually be doing. Do you experience a lot of that with your coaching clients where they have these big goals and dreams and maybe these visions, but they're like, yeah, but this shit needs to get done. Or, yeah, but I can't take the action on what we went over on our call because of XYZ.
When that comes up, because I notice that kind of resistance in myself, it's really what it is, resistance, right? Everyone's got obligations in their life. And if you aren't making the thing that you say that you want to do a priority, then either it's not a priority or there's resistance, and the resistance is showing up because it's trying to teach you something or clear something. And so what I would work them through at that point is just to try and understand what's underneath that resistance, because typically it's one of a few things. It's mostly fear and shame, or feeling not good enough or not deserving enough that you can do it, or feeling like you don't have the skill set or whatever it is. Imposter syndrome is real. Some of the most successful people in the world still have it. And someone was saying this on a podcast at some point. They're like, I've interviewed some of the most famous people in the world, and at the end of it, they're always like, how did I do? Did I do okay? Like, they still have imposter syndrome too. So
isn't that good to know? And I still think that shows a level of giving a fuck. I think when people are still in that place of, did that work for you? We innately are people-pleasing creatures. We want to make sure that how we're showing up is appreciated, and you want to lean into the things that are making it work for other people, especially if you're a guest on someone else's show. So I love that people still care, because that's how I always kind of measure out, do I still really want to be doing it? Just like you asked earlier, do you really want to be doing this? What's the priority? And going in with intention, I think, is key. And a lot of times we are chasing things that maybe aren't even our own goals or dreams. So getting really clear and quiet, like you talked about, of what is it that you really want? Do you want to be doing more of what you love and less of what you don't? Okay, that's a great place to start.
I just wanted to say one more thing. I think one thing that can be challenging is that there's this keeping up with the Joneses culture in this online space where everyone feels like they have to be doing all these things in order to keep up their appearances or whatever it is. And I think if you could just carve your own path and not worry about what everyone else is doing, then you're going to be so much happier anyway and create so much relief.
In the traditional sense, you've taken so many unscripted paths in your life and made choices that people will be like, what is happening? Was there always this creative streak in you since you were little, or did you fall in love with jewelry somewhere along the way? Or how did you get into that business?
First of all, I've been super creative since I was little. I also found out as an adult that I'm dyslexic. So if I look back at my childhood, some things make perfect sense because I had a hard time focusing in class. I was checked out half the time and dissociated and daydreaming most of my time in early school. I did well in school because I think I'm an overachiever. I think there was a lot of pressure to be smart. So I really tried hard to be smart. But it's interesting to look back at that as an adult because I was really creative. And had I understood as a child what that really meant, I probably would have leaned into more of my natural gifts more than trying to be book smart or something like that. To answer your question about jewelry, when I was in high school, I had this really smart boyfriend who was in the top of the class. He was a year older than me. And when I started dating him, I didn't want to appear stupid. I wanted to be smart. So I started taking all these science classes because one day he was walking me to my art class and he said, art classes are for stupid people. And I was like, oh, and I don't even think that he realized what he was saying to me at the time. But I also was like, wait, okay, so I don't want to be stupid. I want to be smart. So I started leaning into science, and I actually did really well because a lot of science at that time, at least, especially biology and some of those classes, were a lot about drawing. And so we had to draw specimens, and I ended up getting great grades in that. So when I went to university, I was going down more of a communications, front-facing, let me be a TV reporter kind of path. And then I decided to take a break from school in between. And during that time, the 2 years in between my sophomore year and my junior year, my mom passed away suddenly. And it was really traumatic and really unexpected. And because I had this thing ingrained in me, I want to be smart. I have to graduate from college. I'm like, I got to get back to school and finish because I need a degree because that's the most important thing. And that's what makes you smart is if you finish school. So I go back to school. And at this time, I'm like, fuck this. I want to be an artist and I want to lean into some of my creative gifts. But I don't have a family supporting me through this school, and I'm going to have to work full time. So I can't be a studio artist. I'm going to have to figure out some other way. So I talked to my guidance counselor. I ended up taking a liberal arts major that was kind of made up for me, but I was able to take art classes as an elective. And the first class I took was a jewelry making class. And it just looked like something fun. I had friends who took the class, and I was like, oh, that's cool. You get some rings at the end of the semester. But my teacher saw this natural talent. And one of the ways that I put myself through school was working in boutiques and then ultimately at Nordstrom. And I was really into fashion. And so I would see all these independent designers in these boutiques. And I'm like, I want to be one of them. I truly believe this. If my mother hadn't passed away and I hadn't been on that path, because I probably would have been in a different school, finishing my degree somewhere else and doing some like BS degree that I didn't really care about, I wouldn't have found that path of jewelry. And thank goodness that my teacher, Sue Dorman, really mentored me. And so I was able to take art classes as an elective, and I took jewelry making the entire time. And so right after I graduated from college, I ended up launching my business as a side hustle and then eventually went full-time a couple years later.
Wow. Again, there's a redirection story for you. That wouldn't have happened if that awful thing hadn't happened, and to your mom and all of that. Thank you for sharing that insight and for sharing that part of the story, because again, sometimes we just think people have these natural gifts that they've always known about and it was so easy and they knew what to go to school for. It's always so nice to just pull back the curtain a little bit and be like, actually, it wasn't as roses and sunshine as it might have appeared, because we see all of your success. We see the accolades on Instagram and we think best-selling author, podcast host, she's a coach, she's got all this success going on, but you've shared emotion with us. You've shared how things still affect you personally and how you're still sensitive in certain areas, which I think is a superpower and a beautiful gift to have that in order to feel. I think holding space for people requires massive level of depth. That's what makes a good coach, I really think, and a good mentor is someone who can actually get in the feels with you and also knows how to process energy and help you move through things that keep you stuck so you can keep growing and keep shining and flourishing like your brand is called, which is so beautiful. I think anybody would be silly not to get into your world. You guys go check her out on Instagram. She's at Tracy Matthews NY, right? So is that for New York?
Yes. I should probably change that. I don't live in New York anymore.
You could, right? It's funny because people will send me their bios or their clips of stuff, or I'll go deep diving on stuff and they're like, oh, I should change it. I'm like, I should have been an editor. I will catch anything. If there's a misprint, now doesn't mean I'm going to get it right when I do it. That's my creative weird eye. And is Instagram a great place for people to come and hang out and find you?
Come connect with me on Instagram. I'd love that. Also, if you want to listen to a podcast about business and marketing, I have Thrive by Design, which is awesome. And if you want to create the desired brand effect for your business, pick up my book, The Desired Brand Effect, Stand Out in a Saturated Market with a Timeless Brand.
Yes, and that is not just for our jewelry making friends. It's for anybody who's building a brand. I think the more time you can spend on honing in on making your brand unique and getting these things locked in, your business will 10x a lot faster than if you're just free willy-nilly, don't have all of these things put in place. These are the foundations that are super important. And so reading books along this way of people who have gone before you and figured this framework out will help you move the needle a lot faster in building the brand of your dreams and really getting clear on what your brand stands for and who you are as part of your brand. Tracy, I'm so excited that we've gotten to connect. I wish you nothing but the most success. I can't wait to grab your book and work on my brand and develop even more juiciness for it. I am also excited to potentially get to meet you in real life soon. I know we share a lot of common friends, so I look forward to either getting to come to one of your retreats or you coming to one of mine or doing something in the near future. Instagram friends, you guys, if there's somebody that you want to connect with, reach out, say hi, talk to them on social media, make social media fun again by being fun on it. Go say hi, share something with somebody if they've impacted you or if they have something that they've posted that you want to learn more about, even if it's very similar to what you're doing. You can have so many friends in the industry that help you grow, that you can collab with, and just keep spreading that network love, because I think that at the end of the day is the most fun part about doing all the things that we get to do. So if this podcast episode inspired you in any way, please let Tracy and I know. Validation still makes your girls feel good. We love to hear from you. We love to know the juicy takeaways. If you related to any part of the story, it means the world to hear from you. We'll see you guys on the next episode of Unscripted.